Okay, this is the third video of the cardiovascular unit, the notes for the cardiovascular unit, and we did the external anatomy of the heart, we did the internal anatomy of the heart, and now we're gonna talk about the blood flow through the heart and a little bit about heart sound. So, the whole point of the heart is to push blood, right? That's what it does. And as I said before, it really has two components to it. There's the right side and the left side, and they work at the same time. They're both pumping simultaneously, and the right side is pumping blood to the heart to get oxygen, and the left side is pumping the blood that has oxygen out to the body to drop it off. So there's really two different jobs happening at the same time. But we're gonna it's a pathway that it travels through. You might remember being a little kid. We're lucky. You guys live next to one of the greatest cities in the country, with Philadelphia. I love that city so much. And there's a great museum there called the Franklin Institute. And you probably went on a field trip there when you were a kid. Hopefully, you've been back since. They've done a lot of good things there, especially with the brain. But the heart is still there. There's still that big giant heart model that you could run through. And you probably ran through it. And you probably didn't really pay too much attention to what you were doing. But in the process, you basically did what we're going to talk about here. So I'm going to run through the pathway of blood through the heart. And then, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about the heart sounds, and hopefully I'll have time to talk a little bit about blood flow to the heart. So, the heart sits in the middle of your chest. The lungs are on the left side and the right side over here. That's what we have, two lungs, so there's blood vessels going both directions. And then you have the head up here and then the lower body down here. So this whole process starts with blood coming in from the body, right? So we have two ways that blood can get, actually there's three ways that blood can get into the heart, but we're going to talk about the first two now. The first one is the superior vena cava, and then the second is the inferior vena cava. The inferior vena cava is pumping blood up from below the heart, and the superior vena cava is pumping blood in from above the heart. So this is going to be all blood coming from your head and from your upper body, and this is going to be blood coming from your lower body and your abdomen. So those both come into what is the right atria. So first step, blood comes in from the superior inferior vena cava into number 2, which is the right atria. The right atria contracts, pushes blood through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle then contracts and pushes blood through the pulmonary valve, and at this point it goes into the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery splits, and it splits into two sides, and this is called the pulmonary trunk. So it kind of looks like a trunk of a tree, right? And that pulmonary trunk splits off into the left lung going this direction and the right lung going that direction. Now you'll notice everything I've shown you up to this point is blue in color, and that is because this blood is deoxygenated, meaning it does not carry oxygen. It is dropped off the oxygen at the cells, and this blood is actually carrying carbon dioxide. So this blood is going to go to the lungs, and it's going to pick up oxygen, right, on the right and left side, and it's going to drop off carbon dioxide. And when that blood gets sent back to the heart again, it is now red in color. Now, to be clear, blood is not really red and blue. There is a difference between deoxygenated and oxygenated blood. The deoxygenated blood has a different color than the oxygenated, but it is not blue and red. That is just, it looks that way through your skin because of how light hits your skin, but the blood is never actually blue. So the blood leaves the pulmonary trunk from the pulmonary arteries, and it comes back in through what are called the pulmonary veins. So the pulmonary veins, we have left pulmonary veins and right pulmonary veins. That blood is going to dump into the left atria. So the left atria is over here. That blood is going to get pushed through the bicuspid or mitral valve into the left ventricle. Now, one thing I do want to point out to you is look at the difference between the walls here. This is the right ventricle and this is the left ventricle. The left ventricle is a way thicker wall. It's much thicker. It's even more than it looks like in this diagram. And the reason for that is this side just has to pump blood to the lungs, which is right here. So it would be like if you had to toss a ball to somebody who was sitting right next to you. You're not going to throw it very hard. You're just going to toss it to them. The blood only has to travel to the lungs. Well, this blood has to travel all the way down to your toes, to your brain, and to your fingertips. So you need a much stronger contraction to push the blood out to the body. So this is going to be the left ventricle, and the left ventricle is going to push blood through the aortic valve into the aorta and then out to the body, where it's going to drop that blood off to the cells. So just one time, real quick, just to say it one more time, we have our superior and inferior vena cava, superior and inferior. They are going to drop blood, this is deoxygenated blood, into the right atria through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, out of the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary trunk, which becomes the pulmonary arteries, which sends blood to the left lung and to the right lung. That blood is going to then pick up oxygen, drop off carbon dioxide. It's going to get pumped back into, now, oops, let's go back here. It's going to get pumped back into the, now we're talking about veins, because veins are going to the heart, arteries are going away. This is now oxygenated blood. We have our left and our right pulmonary veins dumping blood into the left atria. The left atria is going to pump blood, push it into the mitral or bicuspid valve, into the left ventricle. The left ventricle is then going to have a very strong contraction, push blood through the aortic valve, out of the aorta, and then out to the body. Up here, blood is going to the brain and to the upper limbs. Down here, blood is going to the rest of the body. Okay, heart sounds. If you've ever, real quick, everyone take your hand and put it on your heart. Now, unfortunately, we're not in class, and if we were in class, we would have stethoscopes, and I would have you listen to your heart. But we can't do that unless you happen to have a stethoscope at home. So maybe your parents work in the health industry and you have a stethoscope, or maybe you're just that weird kid who asked for a stethoscope for Christmas a couple years ago. Either way, if you have a stethoscope, break that thing out. Get it out. Now you get to use it. And if you listen to your heart, you'll hear two distinct sounds when your heart beats. It goes lubbed up, lubbed up, lubbed up, right? Now, that lubbed up sound is a two-part, it's like a two-stroke engine, because your heart beats essentially in two strokes. So what you're hearing when you hear that sound is you're actually hearing the valves close. So think of someone slamming a door shut. When someone slams the door shut, you hear that sound. Well, these valves are closing very hard because when a heart contracts, it's a strong contraction. So the first sound that you're hearing is, like I said, it's that lubbed up sound. The lub sound, that first sound, is from the AV valves closing. So remember, like I said, the heart is like two pumps side by side, and they're working at the same time. So the right atria and the left atria are both contracting at the same time. They're both pushing blood into the ventricle simultaneously. So when you hear that lub sound, that first sound of a heartbeat, you're hearing the AV valves closing. So that is the blood being pushed from the atria to the ventricle. So lub would be that. And then the dup sound is going to be the SL valves closing. So as the ventricles contract simultaneously, they're going to push blood out of the pulmonary artery and the aorta at the same time, and that is going to be your semilunar or your SL valves closing. So it goes lub is going to be the AV valves closing, and dup is going to be the SL valves closing. So lubbed up, lubbed up. All right, and the last thing I want to get through on this video is the blood supply to the heart, because I've talked so far about blood leaving the heart, but don't forget the heart is a muscle and a very, very hard working muscle. So this heart needs a blood supply as well. It has a high oxygen demand because it's pumping all the time. So you may have heard of the term coronary arteries before. When somebody gets a bypass, you probably have heard of bypass surgery. There are 4 coronary arteries which go to the heart itself. So when somebody gets bypass surgery, if you take a look here, this is the aorta, right? And the aorta is massive. You can't clog that thing up. The amount of cholesterol you would need, the amount of plaque buildup you would need to clog this would be ridiculous. But look at these little guys here. Those are much easier to get full of fat. So when somebody has an artery bypass surgery, coronary artery bypass surgery, that means that these blood vessels have been clogged. And if the blood vessels get clogged, that means blood can't go to your heart and your heart is going to stop beating. That's what a heart attack is. A heart attack is very simply when your blood vessels get blocked off, and when someone gets bypass surgery, they'll take a blood vessel, usually from a person's leg, and let's say there's a clog right here where that little black line is, they would take a little bit of a blood vessel from somewhere else in the body, and they would just make a little workaround. It would be like if there was an accident in the road and you took a detour. So the blood goes around the clot, and now it's able to get to the heart. So if somebody gets single bypass surgery, that means 1 was clogged. If someone gets double, that's 2. And then quadruple bypass surgery means that all 4 blood vessels are clogged, and that person is getting 0 oxygen to their heart. So there are really, and I'm not going to hold you guys responsible for the names of these blood vessels. I just want you to know that there are 4 coronary arteries, and those arteries are going to give blood to the heart itself. So there are 4 coronary arteries. We have the left circumflex, the left main coronary artery, and the right main coronary artery. They branch off and they give blood to the right and left sides. And now what we're looking at here is we're looking at the back of the heart, actually. That's why it might be a little bit confusing. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is the front of the heart. It's confusing for me too, obviously. So those coronary arteries are going to go this direction, and then they have this left circumflex, the left anterior descending, and then we have on the right side, we have the right marginal and the posterior interventricular artery. Again, don't need to know those names. Just know there are 4 arteries dumping blood into the heart. And then just like the heart, every other part of the body, the heart also has to get rid of waste. And that's where these blue blood vessels are. Those are the veins from the heart. So the arteries are in red and the veins are in blue. And what they do is they pick up blood from the heart that is deoxygenated and they dump back into this structure here called the coronary sinus. So the coronary sinus is a large blood vessel, and that is collecting all the deoxygenated blood from the heart, and then that blood is going to dump into the right atria. So if you remember back to the video where I talked about the blood going into the atria, I said it comes from 2 directions. It actually comes from 3. So you have your superior vena cava, your inferior vena cava here. So this is your inferior vena cava, this is your superior vena cava. And the third way that blood gets into the heart is through the coronary sinus. So this is blood from the heart itself. And that is going to be pumped through the same system as all the rest of the blood in your body, and that is going to get oxygenated by the lungs, and then it's going to get pumped back to the heart through the coronary arteries. Okay, that's it for this video. Thank you very much.